creating strong cultural connections, the critical need for brand authenticity and action. This is a session brought to us by our friends at BCW. And we have Brian Elner, who is responsible for growth and marketing at BCW. And we are also very fortunate to have with us Jed Berger, the Global Chief Marketing Officer at Foot Locker. So I'm going to hand over to Brian. And Brian, you can bring us home for the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jed, for joining us, for joining BCW at day one of Provoke. We are incredibly excited to have this conversation with you today. First of all, I just wanted to say I'm a huge fan, like many others who are listening in, of the brand and of the work that you're doing, the authentic connections that you make with diverse communities, your diverse employee base, your social good work, and frankly, Foot Locker's fearlessness, especially in this moment. And I don't want to frighten you, but as you well know, and congrats on your recent elevation to global CMO, you're at the intersection right now of everything that's going on, right? The perfect storm, and you guys have been handling it with grace and purpose. You've seen COVID's impact on retail, the impact on your very diverse associate and customer base, on the fight for racial justice that our country is in the midst of. And the presidential election 2 weeks from today, you've inserted yourself into that by turning 30,000 stores into voter registration hubs. So, my friend, you guys are really in it. So I think we should just jump in. Okay. Let's start with COVID. It accelerated a lot of the trends we've been seeing in retail for a long time, a shift away from brick and mortar and towards digital and online. And wondering how that shift has changed your marketing approach in this moment of COVID, and how much of that shift do you think is permanent for your category and perhaps broadly for apparel?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that first of all, it's been an incredibly intense year, and I am really proud of how our organization has handled it. I'm not surprised. I've said this many times, but Foot Locker Inc. is an organization with just truly high value leadership and just really good humans. And so it doesn't surprise me that the organization has responded the way it has. First of all, I think it's certainly fast forwarded some of our omni initiatives. So even past marketing, but the curbside pickup, it certainly challenged us in some ways with less resources available, but more volume against our digital business. That caused some communication and customer service attention. Like others, we had delayed shipping and some consumer communication that we had to do. But from a marketing standpoint, while some things were, of course, altered, others weren't. We really looked at it in three different parts. So what was our role in the ongoing crisis? We had a lot of stores closed, so we really wanted to focus right then on building demand for the few ideas that are going to establish us for the future. And really reprioritize and making sure that what we're focusing on now is going to be accelerated in 21. And again, this was at the beginning of our fiscal year. And then the third piece was there was just a transactional focus. We did have business that we needed to push through, and we wanted to do that without compromising those first two things I said. So if I'm working my way backwards, I would say the great demand creation via product and connected product stories and digital content is always part of our strategy. I mean, it really is. And I would say that part didn't change. I would say it was much harder to do that. Even the smallest of things like getting samples of product wasn't a significant challenge. We were shipping samples to people's houses, giving them a whole sanitation playbook for how to do that when they got them. We were using animators, and we were just getting overall creative about how we showed product and we told stories. But I think the team did an incredible job doing that. We also immediately established a digital daily meeting first thing in the morning, and we honestly are still doing that today. And we really collectively micromanaged the digital business, and it was some of the best teamwork that I've seen in a matrix organization, which we are. And then we looked at our role that was happening within COVID in a couple different ways. We honestly did want to have some fun with the work from home idea. And then we also wanted to make sure that we were contributing to our associates and communities that were potentially suffering from loss of jobs and just the economic crisis that we thought we were going to be going through as we moved forward. So the fun idea.
I wanted to ask you about that. I know that you guys donated over $1.5 million in footwear to youth communities affected by the pandemic, but you also launched something really cool in COVID, Collaborate, which I think not only is a really great thing that I'd love you to talk about, but also keeps you connected to youth culture and increases your relevance at the same time of doing some really good work in the community.
Yeah, actually, it's a blend of the product storytelling and the product creation that I talked about before, and also, you know, doing what we do best to benefit people that were going to be in need during this time. So we connected those two things. So we partnered with Souls for Souls, and we knew that when back to school was going to come, that there was going to be more families in need than ever before, and we wanted to put shoes on as many kids' feet as humanly possible. So we donated over $1.5 million worth of brand new sneakers to families and kids in need. And part of that was we developed a product collaboration called Collaborate that brought in some incredible names. And every single Wednesday, we drop a different collaboration with all the proceeds going back to Souls for Souls and contributing towards that sneaker donation for kids going back to school. And we've had some, like I said, we've done incredible names, whether it's a Jeff Staple or a Jeff Cole or a Chinatown Market, and we continue to go for the next all through holiday with a different drop every single Wednesday.
While we're on this topic of authenticity and tapping into culture and staying relevant, you've said that sneaker culture is Black culture, and I was wondering, you know, how do you stay true and authentic to that sentiment as a marketer in this moment of racial reckoning, as leading for communications, a multi-billion-dollar global company? And maybe, because it probably didn't come across in your intro, I think you bring a unique point of view to this, given the fact that you co-founded Dime Magazine, and for many years before, heading to a corporate path, you were really in the community, and I think that gives you a certain level of authority to act in this moment.
I don't know if it gives me a certain level of authority, but I would like to say that I've had a lot of experience working in basketball and sneakers, and I will tell you that the past 6 months, and especially the past 3 months, have been incredibly passionate and been incredibly intense and have been incredibly hard for the organization. And I think we consider ourselves a purposeful organization. Our mission is to empower and inspire youth culture. And I actually would tell you that I think the last few months have also helped us find our purpose voice. They really have. They've just, we've always been an organization that has recognized the influence that the Black community has had on sneakers and it has on our business. We've had long partnerships with UNCF, we've had scholarship programs and much more, but I'm not sure that we ever had been able to zero in on our purpose voice until now. And I really think that's what made the biggest difference for us in this past few months. We have an incredible team of Black leaders within the organization. Over 70% of our field organization in North America are people of color, and we had a really powerful and strong employee resource group that's led by that Black leadership, and they've done an incredible job bringing us along and pushing us to where we want to go, and including myself. And getting there was very hard. I think you saw a lot of companies jumped in quickly, and believe me when I tell you that there was pressure on us and myself to do that and to react, but it took a little longer for us, which is totally okay. We needed to talk, we needed to hear each other out, and we needed to come to a thoughtful, meaningful place for us. And historically, retail and our industry is honestly it's a white business, and we want to change that. And while that's not going to happen overnight, I think we really do feel obligated to do our part. So we did commit to $200 million over the next 5 years towards enhancing the lives of both our team members and our communities we serve through economic development and education. And a major part of that is a shift in spend towards Black-owned businesses and creators. And a really important piece of self-awareness, to be honest with you, is we included a line item in that just to help these companies get over some of the financial constraints that either us, or the industry have created. And you wouldn't believe how hard it is for a smallish company to get the funding, to break into our business, to pay for things like insurance or the legal and trademarking, or something called EDI compliance, which you need to be to distribute through our organization. So we're in the early days, but I have to tell you that I'm really proud. I'm really excited about what we're building and who we're building it with.
And, you know, sticking with this for a minute, I mean, that is a seismic commitment, obviously $200 million. Yeah. And it's interesting that you're leaning in not just on community engagement, but also addressing supply chain partners and development of partners and incubators, which I love, and I want to talk about it. But curious initially, what's been the reaction from your employees, or you call them associates, to what you've announced so far? Do they and your consumers feel that you're doing enough? And how is that all playing out internally?
Well, I think that people in the organization are proud. And I think the word enough is probably, we're never going to get there. We're just not going to. We've definitely been challenged in certain ways. You know, I think about a leader in our organization named Jason Brown. He's the head of marketing for Champs in East Bay, and he's an incredibly passionate, thoughtful, and Black leader, and he's been rightfully really emotional about what's happened, and he has, you know, he's pushing me and us as an organization, as are others, really hard, and obviously respectfully and with all the best intentions. And you know, and as hard as that's been, I pulled him aside once in an emotional moment, and I told him that you know, he's serving such an important role in the company. He has to push us that hard, and believe me when I tell you, and I told him this, he's going to push us probably farther than we're willing to go right now. But he's also going to take us farther than we would have gone. And I think that we have members of our organization in place that are doing that for us. And I think if and those guys, this isn't enough. It's not going to be enough, and they are going to continue to push us past our comfort zone. And that is exactly what we want them to do and what we need.
I think it's certainly a moment where all of us need to be pushed beyond our comfort zones across industries. Related to that, I wanted to talk about Project Greenhouse. I love this initiative. I've had the privilege to work with some really great brands over the years who also have done incubators, such as Bonnie and Starbucks and others. This one is super cool. I mean, I think, again, it keeps you on this issue of cultural relevance and authenticity. It keeps you right in there. I mean, you are big, right? Foot Locker is enormous, but this brings it down to a level where you can actually access culture and community, and I think be incredibly relevant, as well as help some really talented people out there in the marketplace.
Yeah. So we launched Greenhouse a year ago, but we actually started plotting it 3 years ago. And I talked about self-awareness, and Greenhouse was born out of self-awareness. It truly was. And I think it's incredibly important for a company to have that. And I feel fortunate to work for one that does. And again, it speaks to the values of the organization and the people who lead it. You said it. Foot Locker is a really significant company, and the sneaker industry is dominated by some incredible brands. But that does make it hard for smaller organizations and to break in, and it also makes it hard for us as an organization to focus on bringing smaller brands and bringing them along and making sure that we aren't moving them too fast because we have this huge scale expectation. Right. And what that has done for us in the past is created sort of this cyclical thing where it's honestly caused Foot Locker Inc. to have a reputation within the industry that the smaller, more culturally relevant closer to the consumer brands haven't want to work with us because they've been a little bit scared of our mass or scared of what we were going to do to them, because we didn't have a team that was born to just nurture them and bring them along at their own pace. And scale means something different for everybody. And part of what we believe the value is that we bring to consumers is that we bring sneaker culture to the people, to a wider group of people, to a wider group of based on gender, based on age, based on race, based on country. We're really our global reach is huge. So we launched Greenhouse to be closer to culture and to bring smaller companies along at their own pace. And maybe they'll end up in Foot Locker and maybe they won't. But it allows us to be much more purpose-driven. It allows us to learn. It allows us to, it actually pushed the rest of the organization to be much more connected, to be much more open-minded about who they could be working with and how they could work. It's been pretty incredible. Last week we had a launch with a company called Kids of Immigrant in LA, and we partnered with Vans, and we exposed them to they're amazing. They're an amazing group of talented individuals that happen to form a company. But they did all the storytelling themselves. They customized the Vans product, and the reaction that we had from a consumer base was incredible. And it allows us to bring them. Now, if this was just Foot Locker, we probably would try to rush them to a bigger, but this allows us, they stay within the Greenhouse ecosystem, and allows us to bring them along slowly at their own pace. And sure, we want more people to be exposed to them, but not at the risk of a discomfort level for them.
And I found it really interesting. I think I read that it's been set up, Greenhouse, as a completely separate entity. You have someone who leads it. They're not even within your office. You give them the space to do that work somewhat independently.
Yeah, and I would say that I used to say I didn't want them breathing our own air. And actually, I will tell you, year one learning, honestly, breathing our own air is important too. And getting exposed and making sure that I underestimated the importance that team was going to have on the rest of the associate base of the organization. I actually did. Bringing them actually closer to the organization and closer to our vendor community is something that I've learned is necessary. The leader of that is a person named Mel Peralta. He's an incredible communicator, an incredible leader, and he has the ability to really influence the influencers within our organization. And like I said, I think I underestimated that. And it's something that we actually have changed. We want to make sure that they have the space and the freedom to sort of break some rules that the rest of the Foot Inc. ecosystem may not be able to do. But we also want to make sure that they're influencing the rest of our organization and pushing them forward. Because without that, there's a piece of what we meant them to do that they wouldn't do.
Right. So you're now in a global role. A few months in, I think.
Yeah.
Wanted to at least one global question in terms of learning lessons. Obviously, you're a global company. You're running a great campaign in Europe that I checked out before the panel. Shoes don't change the world, you do. Shoes don't change the world, being yourself does. It's a campaign in Europe, as I mentioned. It's diversity driven. I love it. I've seen all the videos. I personally really appreciate that it also featured LGBT voices because we are often not seen in relation to sports or athletics or athletic brands. It's one of the reasons I'm on the board of Athlete Ally. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that campaign, but also on the global marketing differences you're already experiencing, whether it's watch outs and cautions, things you can do in one region you can't do in another, especially when it comes to diversity and a lot of the things that are so core to your brand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning, to be honest with you. And again, the North American version of Foot Locker Inc. is a lot different than the European version or the Asia Pacific version. And the reason is, in North America, we're a portfolio. So in North America, the job is, there's Foot Locker, there's Champs, there's Kids Foot Locker, there's Lady Foot Locker, there's East Bay, and there's Foot Action. And that portfolio is a business unto itself and a marketing challenge unto itself. And then there is the Foot Locker Global brand, which is in Europe and Asia and the Middle East and Australia, et cetera. And So I would say that there's a lot of work to be done on making and not having a true Foot Locker global leader. And again, this is from somebody who used to head up the brand from a Foot Locker brand from a North American perspective. And I would like to say that I did my best, but the truth is there's only so many minutes in the day, and what you're driving to is the North American P&L, right? So I'm really looking for. We have great leaders of both our European and our North America, of all of our Foot Locker divisions, but the two biggest ones being the EMEA and the North America. And I have to bring the brand over the next few years. I have to bring the brands closer together and get us more aligned on some things. Like every global marketer would tell you is an opportunity. And I, honestly. Shoes Don't Change the World, We Do, I think is a phenomenal campaign, a phenomenal positioning platform. I think there probably would have been a way to make that, again, self-awareness. I think there probably would have been a way to make that more global than it is. And I'm wearing a Because sneakers hooded sweatshirt right now, which is the North American positioning and platform. There was probably a way to merge that into a global platform as well. So one of the first things I did as a leader is sort of build a roadmap and get the team together and have an ongoing series of meetings where time was inconvenient for everybody on a rotating basis, because when you have people in Asia and Australia and Europe and New York, somebody's going to be inconvenienced. And with the 50th anniversary of Foot Locker is coming up in a couple of years, and that gives us a really big opportunity to make sure we're more globally aligned, and we're celebrating that in a big way. So we actually created a global roadmap, which has some very simple things on it, about very simple things from our brand guidelines to our tagline to our positioning to our how we're going to celebrate that year. And it's making sure that we're all aligned and planning to that and bringing everybody along and coming at it together. So, baby steps. But it's a place that I think we do need. It is an opportunity for the organization to be more globally positioned and aligned.
Agreed. I know you're a big sports fan.
I am.
Also a self-proclaimed mediocre pickup basketball player, which makes me think we should hit the court sometime.
I am also that.
On athletes. So over the last few years, we've seen a lot more activism among them. And I'm just curious, as both a sports fan and as now the global CMO of Foot Locker, what do you think about this shift? I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, back in 2011, I was running the campaign for marriage equality in New York, and I felt athletes would be incredibly important spokespeople, so-called unusual suspects, to step up in support of marriage. And it was like pulling teeth. I mean, it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. We finally got a Steve Nash, no surprise, Michael Strahan, and I think Sean Avery, a couple, some great New Yorkers or people with ties to New York to step up. I think it'd be a lot easier today. You see it across all sports. What's your take on it? And do you think it's here to stay?
So I love it that athletes have transitioned from simply an influencer to role models. And I really believe that they have made that transition. I love that as both a chief marketing officer. I love that as a father to a teenage athlete son. I have seen it dimensionalize our customer base. I truly have. And I think that's amazing. Nobody wants to be put into a box anymore. Nobody wants to be just a ball player. They don't want to be known as just a ball player. They want to be known as a basketball player, but an advocate and an artist and a musician and so, honestly, from a business perspective, it's probably widening what we can do and who we can use from both a collaboration standpoint, from an advocacy standpoint, from a cause perspective. It's actually opened the aperture from a business perspective as well. And I really do believe it's, I've always said sports are a better way to grow up. And I think like the LeBron influence, I really credit him an incredible amount. The LeBron influence on fellow athletes and the younger athletes has been incredible. And I think about the LeBron and the Dwayne Wade and the Chris Paul, and I feel really fortunate that those guys have influenced the influential younger athletes to be role models. I mean, I think today you have 3 young NBA players interviewing Kamala Harris. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
I agree. So much to cover. I think at some point soon we may get interrupted for Q&A, but I'm going to try to sneak 2 more quick ones in.
Sorry, I can talk if you couldn't tell.
No, this is all important stuff. As I said at the beginning, you are really at the epicenter of culture today and all that's going on in this country.
Yeah.
One quick one. I just wanted your thoughts on this because I'm trying to figure it out myself. Sports viewership is down in this COVID moment, and we saw Trump tweeting a lot about the NBA finals. No one was watching, but the truth is it's across the board. I went and looked it up. Golf's US Open down 42%, the Derby 43%, Stanley Cup Finals 61%, NFL down only 14%, MLB Division Series down 40% in terms of viewership. What do you think that's all about in this moment? I harken back, I'm a native New Yorker to 9/11, and one of the things that really brought the city back, the country back, was when sports came back. And I was actually at that Mets game when Piazza hit the famous home run and Rudy Giuliani was at Shea Stadium. I don't think it was Citi Field yet. And, everyone was craving for that connectivity. And I'm wondering, do you think it has to do with us not being present in stadium? Is that there's just so much else going on? For some reason, it's not convening us in the same way it did after 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, there's not one answer to that question, right? I mean, I think, and there's a lot of opinions, and I personally speaking, I do think that the just division within the division within the country has probably affected some of the fandom in certain sports. I think that and I think the in-stadium piece has certainly affected it. I think that baseball has had its struggles for recent years, and I actually think that while the short season there's probably some people who just aren't watching because it's a short season and they think it almost doesn't count. I really do appreciate what baseball is trying a lot of things right now. They're trying a lot of things right now. And I think that's probably something that will ultimately help them with the sport moving forward. I think also the hours that some of these games have been on, especially with the NBA, they were running bubble games during the day on a weekday. I mean, it's not an apples to apples. You're having the NBA compete with NFL during times that have never happened before, and the NFL sort of trumps all from a viewership perspective. So again, there isn't a one-to-one reason for that. There's a lot of reasons, but I do think that sports are learning an incredible amount about the change in consumer watching behavior, and they'll take advantage of it. The young generation was already highlight driven, I think that the NBA and the NFL had realized that they were house of highlights versus necessarily watching games. So there is some learning to how to make the games more like the house of highlights watching experience. So again, I think ultimately all the different sports are going to learn a lot from this and be better off for it. The division of the country, I think we're all hopeful that we get closer together and sports can be a unifier again versus a divider.
Yes, let's hope. 2 weeks. Before I go to take moderator's privilege, one last question, which I apologize isn't probably a short one, and then I'm going to go to some questions I'm getting in the chat. We could probably do this for hours, and maybe someday we'll be able to.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about women, right? Okay. Probably 51% of the market. Pre-COVID and pre this resurgence around Black Lives Matter and racial injustice, there was a big focus on women for brands and marketing. I spent some time working on bringing corporations into the fight for the ERA. I did work with the WNBA and the Liberty and Diageo and so many brands. Everyone wanted to lean in on women. I'm wondering what your sense is around sport. I mean, obviously Nike went big, Serena, probably the greatest of all time across maybe any sport. The women winning the World Cup, the men are never really in it. Where are we in that moment as a country, and then also for Foot Locker as a brand around women's sneakers and basketball sneakers and all of that sort of dialogue that's gone a little quiet in this moment?
Well, I think it's pretty easy for me to talk to from a business perspective. So let me start there, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Let me take the easy way out. No, it's actually not the easy way out, because I'll tell you, this is another place that I think that we as a sneaker and sport industry have not done a good job with product, with offering. You know, the behavior of, from a sneaker perspective, what's happened is that brands and us and others have constantly jumped in with marketing initiatives catered to women over time, because they see the women's business as a gap and a big opportunity. And the amount of times that I've seen the slide that shows the big women's financial opportunity that's out there, and they create a marketing campaign, and they have a great endorser and a great athlete and a great advocate for a sport, and the product creation, the consistent product creation, and the sort of the long-term investment is sometimes not there. So as an industry, we've tended to hop in, spend a lot of money, try to build it from a marketing perspective. When it hasn't immediately returned, we've backed out.
Right.
And then a year, 2 years later, somebody puts up that slide again and jumps back in. Mm. And there's a lot of reasons that doesn't work. One is that product consistency is incredibly important, and product takes a long time to build, especially in footwear. It takes a long time to build. We need a strong marketing and product storytelling commitment from the entire industry, including ourselves, for years. Just like if I look across a year, the amount of stories that we tell as a company about with men's sneakers that have a story designed into the shoe, collaborations, etc. There are so many. When you look at women's sports and lifestyle from a athletic sneaker perspective, it's far, far, far fewer product stories. There might be colors, there might be styles, but the investment into the stories just aren't really there. So I think that that's something that the industry is aware of now, and I think you're seeing brands react to it differently, and we certainly are. But again, we have got to commit for the long run on that, and I'm hopeful that we're doing that.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're spot on. I worked with another completely different product category on a similar challenge, and when there weren't immediate big uptick in sales in that demo, you sort of back away, right? Because it's about P&L ultimately. I agree, it's going to be a long-term solve. Anyway, I'm going to go to the Q&A. For Jen, as an American brand, how does Foot Locker navigate the complexities involved in geopolitics, particularly after the NBA's issues in China?
Well, you know, it's actually part of what I talked about the last 4 months of finding our voice. And finding our purpose. And, you know, I think that there is politics and purpose are different. They are. And I think that just the idea that purpose and politics are different was something as an organization that took time to move away from. And actually it's one of the biggest things I'm proud of our leadership for. Just because we are saying Black Lives Matter, or we are, or we are taking a stance, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily picking a political side. And again, we just had a big partnership with Rock the Vote. Voting is not political. Voting is not political. Under 50% of 18 to 29-year-olds did not vote in the last election. Our mission is to empower and inspire youth culture. It's part of we have an unbelievable platform an audience to talk to and empower them to vote. You know, and I don't think that's political. I think that's purposeful.
You're obviously involved in so many big issues that are swirling, many of which we touched on today so far. What keeps you up at night? I mean, besides all of it, like what is for Foot Locker, separate from the world, like what's your biggest fear or concerns right now?
Well, I know you don't mean it literally, but I'm gonna answer it literally. And I am someone who has, I would say, significant life experience at this point. And I believe in balance. I really do. And I'm going to tell you, the problems are going to be there the next day. And the most important thing to me when the work day ends is that I am the best father that I can be. And I try really hard to go to bed without the work concerns, and pick them up again tomorrow. And I talk to my team about that all the time. You know, it takes a while to get that perspective, and you have to go through some things, and you know, and it took me time it took me a lot of time, but I really believe that I've found my balance and I found my perspective, and you know, there isn't anything that from a work perspective that keeps me up.
Well, I love that. And I think a lot of us in this COVID moment are sort of rebalancing and reconnecting with family and other things that are important to us, whatever that may be: sports, spirituality, exercise, time with kids. That's hopefully some of the good that can come out of this moment, and the consciousness, even for folks as busy as you are.
Yeah.
The other question was about Rock the Vote, which you sort of spoke to a little bit, but really, why did you decide to get involved in the election?
I mean, you know, it's funny because when we built our social action plan and that $200 million commitment, and we chose economic development and we chose education. And believe me when I told you that voting was a huge issue there. But we had many millions of conversations, many of which went late at night, and we picked our lanes. And then we decided that when we really looked at it and we looked at the community and we talked to a lot of people, that we wanted to add it in. And again, it was that 18 to 29-year-old, and you know, I think it's like 49% voted in the last election. And you know, we have a unique platform to that demo. So we turned our stores and sites into instant registration hubs. You know, what I think has been really interesting about it is that it's not just registering, which has been the learning for me. It's been looking up to see whether you are registered. That has been the really interesting learning. There have been so many people, 100,000 plus, that have looked up to see if they are registered, and have found that a lot of them are already registered and didn't know it. It's been really interesting.
Having been very involved in politics, including running for office, I'm not surprised by that, but it's why it's really important that you're doing it. I have one more. Someone wants to know brands or corporations that you admire for their social good or authenticity, either pre-COVID generally, and this fight over racial injustice, or in how they've stepped up in this charged moment to make a difference.
You know, I'm a fan of companies and people being declarative. So you know, and so when I say that, I mean that whether or not I admire companies being declarative, whether or not I think Ben and Jerry's take is right for us, is irrelevant. I appreciate them driving towards something that's right for them. So, you know, I think your classic answers right now are the Patagonias and the Ben and Jerry's. But I also would be remiss to not mention the companies that we work with. I've been super proud of Nike. I've been super proud of Vans. You know, I know Adidas has had its hardships, but in this conversation, but I'm proud of how they're reacting and showing self-awareness. So again, for me, companies that show self-awareness and are declarative, I admire. I think that that's something that I've tried to bring to Foot Locker, and like I said, a lot of it I think we have anyway, just because of our values.
I think it's clear that you've succeeded.
I hope so. You know, again, we're on a journey here. This is nothing short term. And like I said, I really believe we found our voice in the last 4 or 5 months. And I think that voice is going to I think that voice is going to be tweaked, but we're a 46, 47-year-old company and we're finding our voice right now. So we're on a journey. It's long term.
Amazing journey. Great work so far. Thank you so much for joining.
I really enjoyed it. I was honored to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we're at time because I see Paul.
Thanks, Brian. I sensed that we were coming to an end, so I figured I'd make an appearance. Partly because I wanted to say thank you to you, Brian, for a great session, but also to you, Jed. I love the EMEA marketing campaign. The sneakers can't change the world. I think that there's something, and I assume that this was at least partially conscious, there's something a little bit humble about it, which is a really welcome antidote to the grandiosity that I think has crept into a lot of corporate purpose.
Absolutely.
You know, I just think the tone of it, and making the consumer the hero rather than the brand is something that we as a profession need to think more about as we move forward with this stuff.
We talk about the word humility. We talk about the word humility all the time. And again, it's there again, in our position, there's a balance between ego and humility, and you need both for decision making and to have the self-aware, like I said, self-awareness to really connect to the consumer. So I appreciate that.
And Brian, for what it's worth, I was at the same Mets game that you were at. It was Shea Stadium, not Citi Field.
Yep.
Probably the last time I agreed with Rudy Giuliani about anything.
You and me both. You and me both, Paul.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for a great wrap-up session and end of day one. I think I hope it's been a really good day for everybody. We've talked about new platforms for our work. We've talked about navigating transformative times. We've talked about crisis culture in the workplace. We've asked provocative questions like why has global become a dirty word and whether there's a risk in doing the right thing. And we wrapped things up with a really great discussion on brand authenticity with a brand that seems to me to be striving to be as authentic as possible. So I hope that we've covered a lot of the hot button issues that Sorry, I just got a message that the host had muted me, but I thought anyway, never mind. We have an equally cool lineup tomorrow, I think. We're going to be looking at creating value, a response to COVID-19 with Sally Sussman from Pfizer, who I'm sure many of you know. We're going to be looking at embedding diversity and inclusion, fighting fake news and the infodemic. We're going to be looking at Techlash a little bit deeper. And we're going to be asking at the end of the day, another really provocative question: does the dusty cloak of journalistic objectivity mask the truth about racial injustice? That's a panel discussion that will feature CBS News' Wesley Lowery, and a session that I'm really looking forward to. So I hope those of you who've enjoyed today will be able to join us again tomorrow. Thank you very much, and I will see you all in the morning. Bye-bye.